What up gamers, I'm Sir Mav and today I want to discuss with you some changes I'd like to see for Anthem in the future. Now all of you I'm sure are aware of the issues that Anthem has been ridiculed on, such as loot, bugs, and overall content. And we all know of the things that make Anthem great, such as the combat, flight mechanics, and the overall story we take part in. But what many of you may ask, even those that currently love the game still, is what keeps me coming back? Most of you know this is not the only game I cover on this channel and will not be the only game I cover within the future. But today I wanted to discuss with you what would keep me coming back to Anthem day in and day out. To me, Anthem lacks one thing that really pushes people to focus on endgame, and that's progression. For me specifically, that's progression through our javelin builds. As an action RPG looter shooter style game, this was always going to be key to Anthem's success as a live service game. And to get Anthem back on track without actually just upping the loot, I believe the game needs two things: content on the basis of story and events, and meaningful progression. Now don't get me wrong here, I love the trade-offs between 4 different javelins that change up our playstyle, but after roughly 350 plus hours I still don't have a perfected build of any kind for either of these 4 javelins. I believe builds and progression, along with overall content, is what keeps people coming back to the games they love, and even for me the grind is just not meaningful within Anthem. Currently the way Anthem is at the moment, the odds are simply against you when chasing a specific build. RNG is simply not always going to play in your favor. So today I wanted to provide some additional feedback to the developers on what I would like to see come to Anthem within the future. Now I doubt if any of these changes were taken by the team, it would be implemented anytime within the near future, but these are simply my suggestions I would like to see come to the game. Could be a year or so from now, but I believe these changes would bring back some of the players that have dropped off of Anthem as of late. After having a conversation with my good buddy Bags on his stream and his moderator Alum, we mentioned some ideas from the likes of looter games like Path of Exile and Diablo 3, just so you know where some of the ideas are coming from. Now yes, the developers did mimic the Diablo style of difficulty levels, but given the loot drop tables, even Grandmaster 3 content dishes out too low of a meaningful drop rate. But here's the thing, I think the drop rate is fine, as legendary loot should be something we rarely come across, especially in the lower tier difficulty levels. I believe the real issue here with legendary loot is that there is just too minuscule of a difference between them and Masterwork loot. Really the only difference between the two is the overall power level and stats that legendary provides to your javelin, but it still doesn't change the dynamic of how the gear piece works. Which brings us to the first change I would like to see. Let's make Masterwork and Legendary gear more meaningful to players and their builds, and let's make them have a difference from one another. One manner of doing this would be in adding slots on these gear pieces where we could install modifiers that change up the way our builds work. And the way you could make Masterwork and Legendary significantly different from one another is through the number of slots available on the gear pieces depending on whether they're Masterwork or Legendary. For Masterwork gear, they could have 1 slot available for a modifier, and to make Legendary gear meaningful, they could have up to 3 slots available. For our Masterwork and Legendary components, the developers should only place 1 modifier slot for the Legendary components and leave Masterwork components as they are. And what's great about this would even work into the lore of Anthem, as we remember back in the story when the crew was working to create the Dawn Shield. Owen provided us with a seal from Helena's javelin. So these modifiers we're talking about essentially could be called seals, or you could even call them sigils, but likely there could be some problems there, as these modifiers I would like to see wouldn't be one-time use consumables. But whatever they're called, this would bring dynamic changes to our builds and allow a multitude of differences in how each of our javelins play, even those with the same abilities. So now, what would these modifiers contain? Well, I think they could be as simple as what we see within the sigils we use as our consumables. I think the modifiers that fill these slots should contain anything that you would see within any of our sigils, such as armor and shield capacity, any status effect or resistance, and specific ammo modifiers. This would allow players to gear specifically their javelins towards survivability, applying more effect stacks on your target or resist more stacks from enemies, and even gear towards a specific weapon. One thing I wouldn't include in these modifiers is damage of any kind. I think this should come from the inscriptions specifically on our gear. So yes, I know you're thinking it, this would also change the pool of inscriptions that currently roll on our gear. But it would provide us with a higher probability to roll with inscriptions that we actually want on our gear, plus enable us to modify our javelins to cater to specific abilities or weapons. So with that in mind, let's take away passive inscriptions such as those I mentioned earlier from the inscription loot pool, except for armor and shield. These two would still be useful in modifying our javelin's overall survivability. Also, let's bring back the skill trees for some RPG dynamics and move such inscriptions as luck, thruster life, overheat delay, pickup radius, drop rate, and harvest bonus into these slots. You could even make it to where there's 3 paths to each of these skill trees, and you only have a certain amount of skill points that you can acquire a max of. This way we don't just have everything automatically after unlocking it, you have to mindfully make a choice. So it could work like this: we could have thruster life and overheat delay in one slot, pickup radius or drop rate in another, and last we could have luck and harvest bonus. Depending on what we're doing out in the world, you can make changes to the skill tree to go full one side or the other, and make it all balanced if you so choose to. Again, with removing these inscriptions from our gear, we would theoretically remove some options that would originally roll from the inscription pool, thus increasing the odds of rolling the inscriptions we want on our gear. But I would even take it one step further. Now, I've covered this before in a previous video discussing the future of Anthem, but I have to add it in here as well. I would still like the ability to re-roll at least one inscription on our gear at the cost of materials. We could have it to where if you re-rolled a specific inscription on this piece, it would lock the rest of the inscriptions from being re-rolled. You could also continue re-rolling that inscription at the cost of even more materials until you acquired the inscription you wanted. I would also note that there should be a max to the materials needed at some point so you don't completely deplete the materials of the player. This would also incentivize players to keep multiple pieces of gear that serve different purposes. One could be focused on DPS while the other could have additional survivability traits. All the changes I've mentioned above would bring Anthem to the likes of a true looter shooter in allowing us players to min-max our builds properly, and apply more meaningful progression to this action RPG. I think if the Anthem developers can implement this kind of build dynamic and progression within Anthem, then we could once again see the rise of the player base. So what do you think? Would you be all for these changes I mentioned and displayed throughout the video? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you like these ideas, please consider hitting that like button and sharing with your friends. The more people that see this, the higher the chance of this feedback getting back to the developers of Anthem and considering these options. As always, I appreciate the support. Keep in mind though that this would take time to develop and test these changes properly for Anthem, so if the devs did implement such changes, we would likely wouldn't see anything here in the near future. It would probably be more around the lines of a year or so from now. But with that, if you enjoyed this video, tap fire subscribe for more content on Anthem and ring that bell to get notified on my next video. Until next time gamers, this is Sir Mav, signing off.